Hi friends, Aitherea here, and I have a feeling that today's video is going to be a little bit controversial, but I also think it needs to be said. The Final Fantasy XIV community, at least what I'm being fed by my particular algorithms on social media like YouTube and Twitter, appears to be growing more and more negative and critical. And to me, this is a bad thing, and I genuinely find it exhausting. Because after all, I'm just trying to enjoy the game. I like the game. And so I don't really want to constantly see people shitting on something that I like. As part of this growing negativity, toxic positivity has become a buzzword that is frequently used to diminish any arguments made against critiques. It's also common among this crowd of critiquers to claim that toxic positivity is the reason for all, or at least many, of the game's problems. Or perceived problems, I should say, because I don't always agree that those things are even problems. But anyways, essentially, they believe that people are being too positive, and this lets SE and the dev team get away with too much. I actually even got comments about toxic positivity on my video that was all about how your attitude and the attitudes of others will affect whether you have a good or bad experience when you're raiding or doing other types of content in the game. But I personally think the toxic positivity argument has absolutely no legs to stand on, and that people don't really know what this word means. So first, let's look at some definitions of toxic positivity. The first one I have comes from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. Toxic positivity occurs when encouraging statements are expected to minimize or eliminate painful emotions, creating pressure to be unrealistically optimistic without considering the circumstances of the situation. Where positive thinking becomes toxic is when it is expected to get rid of negative feelings. It can be presented as a demand that we must be positive at the expense of other feelings. So most definitions, no matter where you get them from, refer to toxic positivity as forcing a positive outlook even when one is in emotional or physical pain. While some aspects of these definitions could maybe be applied to Final Fantasy XIV, you can already see that, for the most part, we are using this phrase wrong. Most people are not feeling pain or trauma over disliking the Dawntrail MSQ. Most people are not feeling deep levels of distress because there is a lack of content. So when people push back against criticism about Final Fantasy XIV, they're not being toxically positive, at least not when it comes to the standard definitions found when doing a basic Google search. You could argue that when people push back against negative criticism of the game, they are minimizing other people's opinions and putting pressure on them to be unrealistically optimistic, as this first definition I've read sort of describes. And this may be true in some cases. There are sometimes people that are simply dismissive of opinions other than their own, but I would argue that is a problem on both sides of the aisle for this particular conversation. But in most cases, I do think it's just a matter of people having different opinions or possibly pushing back against this kind of criticism because they feel offended. After all, people are going absolutely feral with their hatred of Wuk-Lamat. It's really upsetting, and Yoshi P even had to come out and ask people to leave the voice actress alone. Like, come on, guys. And as a player, it doesn't feel good to see people insult the things that you like. So if you like Wuk-Lamat, of course you might feel the need to push back against that criticism and negativity. And if it feels like me, personally, I am minimizing your thoughts about Wuk-Lamat, it's probably because I also have to continuously witness a landslide of hatred for a character that I love and really related to on a very personal level. Whereas the people that are criticizing her get to just be part of that trendy in crowd that's hating on her, because it does seem to be almost a trend. Almost this fun bandwagon dog pile that everybody is jumping on. But it's not fun for everyone, and it's certainly not fun for me because, like I said, for me, there was some things about Wuk-Lamat and about the story in general that really stuck with me and that I connected with on a deep level, so sometimes it feels like people are making fun of that, and that doesn't feel good. Anyway, most definitions for toxic positivity definitely are centered on mental health. They're not really considering the context of gaming at all. So let's see if we can try to find a little bit broader of a definition. After all, language is ever-changing and is constantly being adapted to different contexts. So let's look for a definition that maybe better fits the context of Final Fantasy XIV. The next definition I found comes from Amplitude Magazine. And so I've got a little snippet here that is talking about toxic positivity, and here's what it says. The good vibes approach only turns toxic when it entails the militant rejection of everyone and everything with bad vibes. It's not healthy to regard depression, anger, anxiety, frustration, despair, bitterness, and whatever else Pandora unboxed as dangerous emotions that you should shun, instead of as natural human feelings that you should feel. In short, when you deny negative thoughts to the point that it causes harm, that is toxic positivity. First of all, I don't think anyone is militantly rejecting the myriad of criticisms being made against Final Fantasy XIV. Even if someone disagrees with a popular criticism, like they disagree that Wooklamot is a bad character or poorly written, there's a high chance that there's something else about the game that they don't like. They're still able to find flaws and they're still able to criticize. And those examples come from me because I think that I'm a pretty good example of this. I disagree with many of the popular criticisms that have been made since the Zeppla era and Walker is the worst expansion video, because part of me feels like that was a little bit of a tipping point. For example, I don't have a problem with the lack of content, and I'll be discussing that a little bit more later. And I also really enjoyed Dawntrail and Wooklamot. That said, I still have made plenty of my own critiques of the game. I have a whole video critiquing the new chaotic raids. I also made a very passionate critique about the changes made to character models as a result of the graphics update. Me and others like me who don't agree with some of the more popular criticisms of the game, such as what we're seeing with Dawntrail, are not toxically positive. We just have different opinions. If you read this Amplitude article, you'll see that the author specifically distinguishes toxic positivity as something that causes harm. If it does not cause harm, then it isn't toxic. Of course, harm is also somewhat subjective. Some people in the Final Fantasy XIV community might argue that being positive about the game is causing it harm because it means that changes that they deem necessary for the game's health are less likely to be made, and thus the game will die sooner than later. The game's fine, guys, just so you know, it's not going to die anytime soon. That's a little bit of a doom thing. Anyway, for others that actually like the particular thing that is being critiqued, there is of course no harm involved, so there is no toxicity. It's all completely subjective. And that's exactly why people are wrong about this whole toxic positivity thing and why it doesn't actually exist in Final Fantasy XIV. Someone having a positive opinion of something is not immediately toxic, even if you think their opinion would be bad for the game if the devs were to take their side. Toxic positivity, as we've seen in our definitions, is essentially forced positivity that ignores circumstances in which negative emotions are natural and even healthy. But if this person who's being positive actually likes something, whether or not that something would be bad for the game, then they actually just plain like it. That is not fake or forced positivity that ignores negative emotions. It's just them genuinely liking something. At this point, it feels like people are trying to use the term toxic positivity to devalue positive statements about the game. If we can invalidate other people's positive arguments, then perhaps we can give more credence to our own critiques. At the very least, we can feel like we're right and others are wrong because their positivity is toxic rather than authentic. And there's nothing we humans love more than being right. The problem is, as I said, most people's positivity isn't toxic. It's just them liking the game, and there's nothing fake, inauthentic, or harmful about that. I also tried searching what is toxic positivity in gaming to see if I could find a definition that was more relevant to Final Fantasy XIV. I didn't find much, but I did find one interesting Reddit post describing toxic positivity that happens to align more so with my own stance. They wrote, "Toxic positivity is the harsh policing of negative sentiments. It doesn't mean people liking something, it doesn't mean people sharing the same positive opinions as one another, and it doesn't even mean people offering repetitive praise. Those things can be annoying, but they're not toxic positivity." To look at an opposing opinion on toxic positivity, I found this post on Steam forums about a different game. The writer is essentially complaining that other people see no problem with things that they find problematic, and they're labeling that as toxic positivity, which, as I have already explained, it's not. It's just a difference in opinion. When people get pushback on their critiques, or when they see others saying that they like or are fine with some feature of the game, it feels like they're quick to say that the Final Fantasy XIV community has a toxic positivity problem. But that is not the case. The reality is that everyone has an opinion, and opinions are subjective. Some people will find a certain aspect of the game to be annoying or flawed, whereas others won't even notice that thing. They won't find it to be annoying, they'll be completely indifferent towards it, or maybe they even like it. I think a good example would be the content lulls. A lot of people have been feeling like there isn't much to do in the game and they wish there would be more content. I, on the other hand, actually genuinely like content lulls. I feel that they often come during the perfect time for me. For example, I'll have spent a couple of months doing different content in 14, and then I'll be ready to take a break, and oh look, content lull. Perfect. I'm the kind of person who, unfortunately, is really bad at playing multiple games at the same time, so if there's stuff that I want to do in 14, I will put off playing other games until I've finished scratching that 14 itch. I'm really bad at playing 14 one day and then playing another game the next day. I just can't seem to divide my time between more than one game. It's kind of all or nothing for me. So for me, I've never really felt the sting of the content lull because I'm either still finding things to enjoy in Final Fantasy XIV, or I'm excited that I have an opportunity to play other games without feeling like I'm missing out on anything in Final Fantasy XIV. Like, I can't express to you how much I appreciate that 14 is very low FOMO. So when I hear people talk negatively about a lack of content, I just don't really agree with them that it's a bad thing, because not only am I able to find things that I still want to do in Final Fantasy XIV, but I'm also excited about the lack of FOMO that allows me to enjoy other games. I'm okay with the fact that there isn't more content than this. And this response isn't me being toxically positive, it's just me liking an aspect of the game that some other people don't like. But some people will still call that toxic positivity and claim that it does harm because getting more content doesn't hurt me in any way, but not getting more content hurts others. So basically they feel that I should be joining the call to arms and trying to get more content, or at the very least I shouldn't be talking about the fact that I like content lulls. The thing is, you're asking me to do something that I don't know if I even want. I said that I like content lulls because I do, and I don't really know what more content entails. It seems to mean something different for everyone. Final Fantasy XIV is my cozy, lazy game. I'm sure most of us don't want more chores, but we need to be clear in what is meant by more content before I could ever think of getting on board with that movement, because I really enjoy how easy it is to put this game down and pick another one up. If I join the battle for more content, I could be fighting for something I don't actually want. I could be pushing for the game to become more like World of Warcraft, which, according to my friend who plays and does really enjoy the game, has much more FOMO, much more chores, and more artificial extensions of gameplay. What do we mean by artificial extensions of gameplay? Well, one example would be time gating, similar to how you can only open one chest in Savage each week. Even if you get nothing from that chest, clearing again won't allow you to get any more loot. You basically have to farm it every single week until you've either gotten a lucky roll or gotten enough pity books to get the gear pieces that you want. So I'm not being toxically positive about the content lulls. The thing I am defending is something I actually like. I'm not just trying to stop people from being negative or critical. And while some may say that I'm doing harm by being positive and liking content lulls, I could also argue that it might do harm to me if things were different, because the game might introduce systems that I don't like. At the end of the day, different people like different things. That's not toxic positivity, that's just life. And as a quick aside, because I know I'm going to get a bunch of comments about this if I don't say anything, I do agree that the timetable for content releases in Final Fantasy XIV should be rearranged, because I do agree that casual players have kind of gotten the short end of the stick, at least recently. Those of us who like challenging content like raids have had our extremes, our savages, now we got the chaotic raid, which takes a few weeks if not longer to farm. And by contrast, casual players haven't really gotten any long-term farms yet. So perhaps it would be better if the exploration zone or things like the variant dungeons came out sooner. But anyways, time to wrap up this conversation on toxic positivity. So I hate to say it, but it feels like the Final Fantasy XIV community does not really understand what toxic positivity is. Instead, this term seems to be a tool that people are using to try and add credence to their own arguments by diminishing others' genuine enjoyment of certain aspects of the game. If they can reduce this enjoyment to toxic positivity, then they can argue that most players don't actually like those things. It's just people faking it and being toxically positive. Toxic positivity seems to be a new buzzword akin to white knight. People don't actually like this thing, they're just white knighting. Both words are often overused and misused because, for whatever reason, some people just can't accept that others have different opinions and may actually like something that they dislike. Simply put, toxic positivity in Final Fantasy XIV isn't real, and I think it's time to retire this buzzword. Anyways, that's the end of the video. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a sacrifice to Lord algorithm in the form of a like, comment, share, or subscribe. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to my channel members for supporting me. Bye! In fact, the only toxic positivity that I've seen in Final Fantasy XIV related communities at this point has been me telling people to stop hating on Dawntrail and Wuklamot in my Discord server, because if you do that, I swear to God, I will time you out, mute you, and possibly kick or ban you from the server. I'm so fucking serious right now because I'm so tired of it. I get it. You don't like it, okay? I have seen, when did Dawntrail come out? Was it July? Literally, I have seen 6 months of this bullshit. I think it's time for me to have peace in my own fucking server, okay? Shut the fuck up. Okay, I'm so sorry. That was off the cuff. I just went crazy there. Let me start over.